Welcome to the Nutritional Mental Health Podcast, the podcast where we talk about the intersection of nutrition and psychological sciences. I'm your host, Annika Angelo, a nutritional mental health practitioner with a master's in health psychology. I'm passionate about making science accessible and stories listened to. To dive deeper into nutritional psychology, you can find me on Instagram at NutriMindCoach. And now, let's get into this episode. We're cutting through all the wellness industry noise on gut health with registered dietitian Gabrielle Palmieri. Gabrielle takes a root cause approach to all of her clients' gastrointestinal concerns and is a social media educator on the nutritional science of what gut health truly is. So thank you so much for coming on. I'm excited to talk all about gut health with you.
Hello, thanks for having me. Me too.
Yeah. What actually was your journey into gut health and why do you educate people on it nowadays?
I would say I could take this in a lot of different ways, but I mean, the whole reason I'm a dietitian is because I struggled with an eating disorder and disordered eating. I did have some GI issues when I was a child, but they got worse because of my eating disorder and disordered eating. I felt like I was teaching my body how to eat food and break down food and do the whole thing all over again. Um, and I felt like it was such a good space that everyone struggles with. Like everyone is always talking about being bloated or having GI issues. And I just always find it really interesting. Like I have some people in my family that there's some colon cancer and like IBD, diverticulitis, stuff like that in my family. And just IBS, where we don't really know exactly what's going on. We just know that things are uncomfortable. So I was always interested in it, started learning about it. And then when I was working in the hospital, one job offer was at a children's hospital to do inpatient and outpatient care. I ended up doing pretty much everything, but my main area was GI. So I got to work with a lot of inflammatory bowel disease patients, celiac disease patients, food allergy sensitivities, EOE, just so many different, there's just so many different cases where someone needs to be on an elimination diet, even if it's just for a short period of time. So yeah, it was partly interest, partly personal experience, partly colon cancer's on the rise, and I'd love to help people, not feel like they have to plan out their day according to like their pooping schedule completely. Like, oh, I can't go to this because I'm gonna have diarrhea. Sorry. Like to be honest, like I just think a lot of people's lives, their life gets halted very easily if they have GI issues, and not a lot of people talk about it because it's somewhat uncomfortable to talk about on the internet. And I like talking about it because I feel like it's helped a lot of people. And yeah.
Yeah, I mean, just even introducing the Bristol chart, like,
Yeah. Yeah.
make sure people actually know what they're supposed to look like. Like, you're not
Yeah.
supposed to have very runny all the time or having very difficulties passing.
Yeah.
But
And
that's not
there's like,
normal.
no, it's not normal. And there's a lot of like patients where, no, it's not that simple. We can't, it's not like we're going to have one appointment and figure out exactly what's going on. But then there's some people where I could talk to them for like 30 minutes and tell them what they're doing. I don't want to say wrong, but what they could do to feel significantly better. So I think it's just the education and awareness. And like a lot of times in GI, you'll wait months to get into a GI doctor, and then they're just like, oh, you have IBS, or oh, you're just a little constipated, like do a Miralax cleanse or something. And that's not to discredit GI doctors. They're brilliant and they're definitely looking for, very important things. But I will say for IBS patients where it's more just like, I have diarrhea sometimes, I don't love it, I have constipation other times, like something's off, I feel more bloated, a doctor's not going to have the time to like sit down and talk to you about it. And what I really love about my practice and educating in general on gut health is being able to ask questions all about my patient's medical history and even like their travel history and different foods, food poisoning, antibiotic use, like all of that. I really like to dive deep and put the puzzle pieces together. And it's really interesting when we kind of get to the bottom of it.
And sometimes the bottom of it maybe was like past eating patterns. Like, I don't know. I think of like my own experience and how similar to you, I did some disordered eating and have had to retrain my body to even digest properly. I don't know. Is that a common trope that you see? Like people who have disordered eating histories end up having some gut health issues?
Yeah, I think what I see more so is people coming to me where they did like a food sensitivity test or um, some other test, and they're just at this point they're just scared of food. So it's not necessarily that they had disordered eating and then that caused gut issues, which does happen a lot. But I would say most of the people I see, it's like because of their GI issues, now they're a little disordered, and we don't really like tell them. Like I don't necessarily label it as disordered, but I mean, we talk about the importance of not being scared to eat certain foods, because when you are scared to eat certain foods, your body's going to be in fight or flight and you're not going to digest the food. So, yeah.
Mm, yeah, actually, that's a really good thing to talk about just because, like, when we do have stress, our body doesn't process nutrients as effectively as it could because we are in that fight and flight instead of rest and digest.
Yeah.
And so, do you know how could like chronic fight and flight influence our gut microbiome?
Yeah. So essentially, which I'm sure you talk about this a lot, like our nervous system has the parasympathetic and the sympathetic nervous system. So sympathetic is fight or flight, stressed state. Parasympathetic is rest and digest. So as the name implies, the more you're relaxed, the better you're going to digest your food. Um, so chronically stressed doesn't necessarily need to be like a big event, like you lost a job or a breakup, but it can just be your day-to-day activities, because we're in the US and we're always like go, go, go. So it can be anytime you're rushing. So like if you're late to something and you're just eating something quickly on the go, your body's focused on getting to the destination. It's not focused on digesting. It's focused on, maybe you're driving, for instance. It's going to focus on that, your heartbeat, like major things. It's not going to focus on the small digestion from the protein bar you're eating. And it all starts in our mouth, but honestly, our brains. So like if we are not focused on the meal, and we're on the go, we're standing up, we're eating our food too fast. Sometimes there's times where I've done it too, where you like look at your plate and you don't even remember really eating it. You didn't really make it an experience. And that's not really giving your body enough time to know that digestion is occurring. So even just the thought of food, the smell of food can increase saliva production in your mouth. And like even if you talk about it, you will have more
I was
saliva in
gonna
your
say
mouth. Like
my
it's
saliva is going right now.
yeah, that's just what happened to me too. So increased saliva production releases salivary amylase, which is partly what breaks down carbohydrates. That release kind of triggers the whole system. So you swallow your food hits your stomach, it mixes with stomach acid if you have enough. But sometimes if you're in a stress state, or you're eating too fast, or you just are on maybe PPIs, so you're on acid reflux medication and your stomach acid is a little, I don't want to say low, that's not the right term, but you don't have enough stomach acid because of the medication, then it might not properly mix with the food. But in an ideal world, your food mixes with the stomach acid and then it moves to your small intestine. And that movement from your stomach to your small intestine is what's going to trigger more digestive enzymes, bile, like the whole thing to digest all your food. So it really starts at the top and goes down. So generally, when I work with someone, we kind of want to start at the top, and the whole stress thing, that's going to be something you're going to always have to deal with. But as long as you can try to even do just some deep breathing, box breathing before meals, or trying to limit the amount of times you are eating really fast or eating on the go or eating in a stress state. And then also chewing your food enough, doing things kind of at the start of the at the start of the digestive process can help with kind of the rest of the process.
Yeah. So Sonica, it kind of sounds like it's almost twofold because, like what you talked about, there is that fear, like when you already have gastrointestinal issues, there's that fear that if you eat something, it's going to disrupt your system, or if you don't eat correctly, or if you don't like pair your protein and carbs effectively, or whatever. There's a lot of that stress and that fear coming from there. And then there's
Mhm.
also that stress and fear around food coming from like social media with how to improve your gut. When in reality, it sounds like it's just being aware of how you're eating and what your perspective is. That's going to do really, really important help with your digestive system.
Yeah, and I mean, like, it only no matter what the case is, whether you have an allergy or an intolerance, or there's sometimes people's immune system is activated from something and they have end up being like intolerant to histamine. So there's a lot more complex issues that are at play, but whether it's complex or it's more simplified, everyone really needs to start there. It's kind of something that's the only advice that I would say is not individualized. Like everyone needs to work on relaxing more and putting themselves in a rest and digest state for eating. But that doesn't mean doing some of the other things and eliminating certain foods aren't going to also make a huge difference. So it's kind of a combination of things. It's hard to pick one.
Mm, yeah. So, sort of going back to just how there is a lot on social media, what are some common like gut health myths or things that you keep seeing online that you just find to be ineffective messaging or unhelpful messaging?
Um, I'm a very open-minded person when it comes to like supplements in general. And I think the issue with social media is one, it's a platform to make money. So ads are disingenuous from time to time, where it's kind of making statements that are just, I mean, yeah, not actually that accurate. And then I think another thing is people are really passionate about sharing their health, but because they didn't have the educational background, maybe that I did or some other healthcare provider did, they don't really understand I guess maybe the dangers behind recommending certain things. So I'm always happy when people find something that works for them and they want to share it, but it is not that black and white. So I do sometimes read like the comments on those posts and people are like, "Oh, I should get butane HCl and all these things and they're going to help." Um I think it's more so just one supplement probably isn't going to make the world of a difference. I mean, it can, but it could also be partly in your head if you are I don't want to say in your head, but sometimes if you take a supplement expecting it to have benefits on your gut health, it does because you're automatically feeling more relaxed. Let's say you take because digestive enzymes, I love digestive enzymes. I think they definitely have a purpose. But let's say you're taking digestive enzymes. One, it's going to provide you more digestive enzymes, but you're also going to probably feel a little more secure when you go into that meal because you know you have the digestive enzymes. So I think it's just a little more complex. But I don't know if people really need to be educating that complexity on the internet. I don't know. I just think a lot of people are buying supplements that could hurt them. I guess the best example would be butane HCl. So like um butane HCl is taken if you don't have enough stomach acid, which like I said helps you break down your food and move it to the small intestine. So it can be helpful for some people, but if you have gastritis or acid reflux, it really depends why you have the acid reflux because adding more acidity could cause some issues for you, like
Yeah, I mean, I
burning of the
just,
esophagus.
yeah. So, like, I had reflux, right? And like, I had to learn that there are multiple types of reflux. Like, it's not just high stomach acid content, it could be low stomach acid content, or it could simply just be your LES, like your lower esophageal sphincter is like too loosey goosey. Like,
Mhm.
it's not just a one size fits all. So, for me, if I added digestive enzymes, I'm pretty sure that one would have harmed my reflux, I think, because I think I had the type where I had too much. which is why when I tend to drink like a lemon or a lime, like when my reflux acts up, it tends to help improve my digestion.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah,
Yeah.
it's definitely like figuring out for yourself what
Yeah.
is going to improve it.
And it can be hard because people don't want to spend money or waste their time with another provider if they didn't feel like they were listened to or heard from the first one. Um, but I think it's just, I mean, there are a lot of people on social media that are awesome and see clients, see patients. But I understand it being like difficult and more of an investment. But I definitely think it's worth it. So you really don't waste money in the long run on trying different supplements, um, depending on who you work with. But yeah, I think there's a lot of claims on the simplicity of gut health in general. And it's okay, but I just don't want people to be misled.
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly it. I think that's what bothers me personally because it's shown to be very simple when in reality there's way too much nuance and way too much complexity to put it into a certain like this is the protocol for everybody.
Yeah, exactly.
Like not everyone needs to go low FODMAP, right?
No,
And
no.
like for some people, obviously, yeah, that's going to really improve their symptoms. And then
Yeah.
ideally adding more foods as like you work with someone who knows what they're doing. Um, but like it's nothing is a one size fits all. And like one thing that I think about as like a gut health social media thing is just how like everybody knows now, which is amazing. And I love this, that 95% of our serotonin is created in our gut. And that's true. Like, yeah. But the thing is, it's not necessarily there to help our brain because it's in our gut. And yes, like it can help communicate through the different axes, like the HPA axis or the vagus nerve or the cytokines. Like it can communicate with our brain, but it's not there to improve our mental health specifically. It's there to actually regulate ghrelin and it's there to help regulate basically like our digestive system a little bit.
Yeah. Isn't it different than serotonin in the brain? Like I kind of thought that was debunked in a way, but maybe it wasn't debunked. Maybe it was more, I don't know. Can you explain the difference between serotonin in our gut versus serotonin in our brain and what the benefits would
Yeah.
be?
It's again both very simple and both very complex at the same time.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So it really is that. Like when we take in tryptophan, um, it turns into serotonin. It
Hmm.
can also cross our blood-brain barrier and then turn into serotonin. So it turns into serotonin in two places, which is why actually I think this is a really fun fact. When you eat your carbohydrates with a tryptophan-rich food, which tends to be protein, we actually see increases of tryptophan crossing the blood-brain barrier, which then means more serotonin, which is awesome for our brain. So eat our carbs. That is a good moral of the story here. Um, but
Carbs make you
yeah,
happy.
they do. They actually do, which is awesome. So yeah, like our serotonin in our head is typically, or I guess our brain, it's typically connected, with depression, with anxiety, like both of those two, specifically for most mental health conditions that we think about. Um, but then when we think about the serotonin in our gut, it's more connected, like I said, with ghrelin, more connected with improving our digestive function, which is possible. It's possible that it's connected with the stress aspect. So we do see when we are in more chronic stress or when we're in more of a fight and flight response that our gut serotonin doesn't get created as much,
Hmm.
which maybe is kind of a reason why we tend to experience more gastrointestinal distress when we are stressed or when we're going through chronic stress.
Yeah,
So,
cool.
yeah, it is really cool. Um, but there is still like a correlation because there's research out there that when you have an SSRI, it
Hmm.
improves your ratios of bifidobacterium and firmicutes and bacteriotes, like the bacteriotes firmicutes ratio, and then increases bifidobacterium.
Hmm.
And all of those are also associated with increases of serotonin in the gut. And so like there is some sort of like
It's so
bi-directional.
cool. Yeah, it's really cool. There's a lot of people that are put on like anxiety medication, for instance, that their IBS symptoms go away once they're on anxiety meds,
Yeah,
which is crazy.
it's so crazy. Like that's how I got rid of my GERD. Like I went on an SSRI and then was like, oh wait,
Stress
I'm
induced.
not
Yeah.
throwing up all the time. Like my what?
I mean, that just goes to show exactly what I said at the beginning. Like, I mean, that's such a big part. Your brain is such a big part, and that's going to change like day to day. Like, I notice a difference on days that I'm more stressed versus not immediately with my digestion and everything. It's like the nervous stomach. Like, it just, that's what happens. And then I've had like clients come to me where they're like, yeah, the doctor just told me I have a nervous stomach, and that's why I have IBS. And I'm like, okay, well, yeah, but let's like work on not being so nervous.
So yeah, if someone came to you and like that's what their doctor told them, what are some steps you typically help them take?
We start from the beginning. It's basically a Q&A for a while. We'll talk about medical history, family history, what they've tried in the past, what worked, what didn't work. I will very in-depthly go through their medications and any supplements they're taking. So multivitamins or single ingredient supplements or protein powders, greens powders, all that. We talk about any food sensitivities that they've experienced or any food allergies, any medication allergies, um, how much water they're drinking, if they're sleeping enough, their stress level, what their day-to-day looks like, what their work environment's like. If they're traveling a lot, I'll ask them kind of when symptoms started, if I really want to gauge a pattern. So I've had some clients that they'll be like, oh, my symptoms happened around COVID, or my symptoms happened after I came back from a trip abroad. And that could have been due to food poisoning, for instance. So a lot of times food poisoning can really disrupt your gut microbiome for a long time. Another common thing that people typically, I shouldn't say typically, but people will live with for a long time without realizing is H. pylori, which is a bacteria in the stomach. And that bacteria thrives in a neutral environment in our stomach, and we want our stomach to be acidic. So neutral isn't where we want it to be. So basically, they're not digesting their food because they're living with H. pylori. So then we have to fix the H. pylori. But sometimes it's simple where someone's just really, really stressed. They're not drinking enough water. They're not eating enough fiber. I'll have them kind of give me an idea of what they're eating. And then let's say they're eating a lot of carbohydrate rich foods, and they get symptoms with onions and garlic, for instance. That could be an indicator of, okay, maybe we should try a low FODMAP diet. But typically, if it's not as obvious in the beginning, I like to just do the initial assessment, get all the information, and then we'll do a diet recall. I'll give them some tips on where to find fiber and how to increase it gradually. And I will ask them to like track their food for a week or 2 weeks, at least giving us a few days to review it, follow up, so we can kind of notice any patterns in their eating habits. So really journaling about how you felt before and after the meal mentally, how fast you ate, what you ate, was it takeout or what did you make it from home? So it's more of a slow process, but I try to just get a good idea of what they're doing now and kind of go from there.
So sort of with that, do you ever just see people just is it typically like just not enough fiber? Like is that a common experience or is
Pretty much everyone. Yeah, but it's never, unless it's never just that, no, I would say. I mean, there's some people that just aren't eating enough fiber and then they eat it and they feel a lot better. But maybe they're also trying to lose weight or just stay motivated. So it's, people come to me, I think, not I think, but people come to me, maybe it's for primarily gut health, but then there's always more things that we're dealing with when it comes to our health and wellness and nutrition in general. Um, so it ends up being kind of more of a long term, okay, how can we keep your gut health optimal for a longer period of time? How can we help you get to the gym more? How can we help you with weight loss? Or maybe how do we help you improve your relationship with food if you struggle with disordered eating? How can we lower your cholesterol? So, um, yeah, it's kind of a
Mm.
combination of things.
Yeah, I don't know. I just feel like I see so many people online who are science educators for nutrition, just on how like 2024 year of fiber, and I loved that.
Yes.
Like,
Yeah, I loved it too.
oh, it was just amazing. So,
It's fun. And there's so many really good, like, honestly, my main goal when I work with people, whether it's gut health or not, is to have them understand where their food sources are coming from. I want them to understand food. It's not going to be the same as how I do, but I want them to kind of learn it how I learned it, where it's like I first learned all the carbohydrate sources, all the protein sources, all the fiber sources, different types of healthy fats, all the different ingredients. Like I want them to learn so they can make better choices. Um, and when you learn all your fiber sources, it becomes easy to get to your fiber goal. And if not, there's so many supplements that are awesome to incorporate as well. Um, but I think I'm very big on educating so people can understand things long term because you're not just going to take something out and then that's going to help you for the next 10 years. Like if you can understand where to get more optimal nutrition sources and at least understand how your body works. So maybe alcohol is a really big trigger for you, or coffee is a big trigger, or maybe you just don't tolerate gluten very well or dairy. If you kind of if you can understand where your symptoms are coming from, it makes it a lot easier to manage because like I would be lying if I said my like gut health is a really hard term to kind of explain because I doubt really anyone's gut health is perfect on every single day. And people might say it is, but it's every day is going to be different. You might have been exposed to something food poisoning wise, or like I said earlier, like sometimes if I am nervous or I'm stressed and it's around a mealtime, like I'll get a stomach ache, like that happens, but at least I know why I have a stomach ache. And I think that's what's really important for me to help people understand. And that's like whenever I'm working with someone and they'll be like, yeah, things are going really well, but I ate this and then I understood why my symptoms happened. I'm like so happy. I'm like, yeah, see, like as long as you can understand where it's coming from and you know your triggers, it's better than being blindsided. Oh, why is my stomach killing while I'm at work right now? Like, why is this happening? That's
yeah.
kind of where people come to me like very lost because they're reacting to all these things and they're like, I have no idea why.
Mm. Just like cultivating bodily intuition, which we've been
Exactly.
stripped of basically since diet cultures existed.
True.
Like, yeah. And like with sensitivities, I feel like a trend I've been seeing online is people saying that they're sensitive to fiber and then just completely cutting out all fiber sources. What
Yeah.
is your take on all this as a gut health dietitian? What should we be thinking about all of that?
It makes me sad because no one wants to live like that. I mean, you might, but no one really, I don't think anyone really wants to be eating steak for every meal for the rest of their life. Like, for instance, like if there's foods that you love and you feel better taking them out, awesome, but you should understand why they upset you in the first place. And I think people don't feel like they're getting the care they can get. So they resort to, okay, well, if I eliminate all these and feel better, then that's that. Like I have to just keep them out. But that's not necessarily the case. You might have to take them out short term and just to lower the inflammation. That's essentially what's happening. But the goal would be to reintroduce foods and improve your tolerance to those foods. So there's a couple examples. So like If you were to go on the carnivore diet, for instance, that is essentially you eating whole foods. Like you're eating meats, you're eating dairy, you're eating grass-fed beef and grass-fed butter. Everything is very clean. So you're going to feel good. You're automatically going to probably be buying less packaged processed foods because you're on the carnivore diet. You're going to, stick to it. You're not going to go buy processed packaged foods. So you're automatically going to feel better. The foods that have fiber in them, people are sensitive to. They can be sensitive to, and it's because their body's not used to the fiber component. So, or they just have too much inflammation going on. So gradually increasing the fiber and finding out what foods really are triggering you. For instance, some people might not, let's think, like there's cruciferous vegetables. So broccoli, Brussels sprouts, cauliflower, asparagus, those make a lot of people gassy. So maybe cutting those out and eating the others, you'd be fine. Or sometimes eating cooked veggies or peeling your veggies can help. Or some people will take a food sensitivity test and it says they're reactive to all these foods. That's because the main issue at play when you're reacting to all those foods, either you're not used to fiber or like you have leaky gut essentially. So basically the lining of your gut is not protecting you and you're allowing bad bacteria in and it's multiplying and we're not providing enough good gut bacteria. So if you're already in that situation and then you take out all the fiber, you're never going to repopulate your good gut bacteria. So you're automatically always going to feel like that. But then you're going to be on a restrictive diet that's going to mask those symptoms. But you're going to end up maybe not having enough vitamin C or different electrolytes. I think even Carnivore MD was like, yeah, I was getting really lightheaded and I needed to kind of supplement with electrolytes. So the diet's changing, but I think it's an okay option short term, but I think I would love for people to let someone help them to find what's actually going on. Histamine is something, a histamine intolerance is something that I've been, sorry, I'm like ranting.
No, please just like keep I'm so interested.
I recently had a client, which I've had a couple like this, but she had a really bad bacterial infection in her gut. She basically got food poisoning to the extreme, had to go to the hospital, and was on antibiotics for a while. So the food poisoning pretty much destroyed her gut. The antibiotics got rid of all the bad bacteria, but they also got rid of all the good gut bacteria, which is a common trend. And not a lot of people are educating people on the importance of, okay, after antibiotic use or sometimes on, how can we repopulate your healthy gut bacteria? So if you're not taking probiotics in that instance, probiotics can be really helpful after antibiotic use. But she was having somewhat of an immune response even after the antibiotics. So she didn't have the bacterial infection anymore, but she had major migraines and all of a sudden she was sensitive to all these foods. Essentially what happens is, and this happens too with patients, I've had patients where they had COVID and their body never really fully went back down, but the best way to put it would be you're sick, you get better, so you're technically better, but your body still thinks something's trying to hurt it. So it thinks there's still some type of invader and it's going to attack itself. So mast cell activation. So our white blood cells, our mast cells are basically our immune cells that release antibodies and things to protect us when we're sick. So after you're sick, those should usually go back down to like a normal level. But if they're still activated, then there's foods that contain histamine or naturally release histamine, and histamine is a mediator that's released when you are going through an inflammatory state. So people might eat tomatoes or fermented foods. They might be eating, this is a good like myth, like kombucha, sauerkraut, any fermented food. It's good for your gut, but it's not good for your gut if, let's say, you're sensitive to histamines now. If anything, it's going to exacerbate your symptoms. So there's a lot of really, really healthy foods that contain histamine or can release histamine. And if someone is going through something that is more chronic and it's causing a lot of ongoing GI issues, it could be worth looking into, okay, let's try a low histamine diet. And sometimes it's pretty simple. We start a low histamine diet and then some clients are going to be, it's going to be easier for them than others, but typically they will start to notice that they start to tolerate foods that they once didn't tolerate because we've lowered the inflammation in their body and calmed things down. So yeah, it's really cool, but I think it can be overwhelming. So it's easier to just take out certain foods and live your life like that. But there are a lot of good nutrients that you could become deficient in, especially women. Like when we're menstruating and our hormones, we need so many good vitamins and minerals. And if we're not supporting our body and our detoxing organs with all the nutrients it needs, like it's not really a way to live, I don't think.
No, it really isn't. And like, that's just something that I've had to learn for myself too. Like it's one thing to just not eat all the foods that trigger you. And if that makes you feel okay, that's amazing. But if you're also in a point in your life where, say, your inflammation went down because you did like a lower fiber diet for a while, or a low FODMAP, or low histamine, right? If we're at a point of basically your body's sort of reset, ideally, we would be able to start adding and building up our tolerance again.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's why, like, when I first became a dietitian, I got certified to do food sensitivity tests. And those aren't to say like not to say we should completely discredit them, but it's interesting because I had a patient that I put her on a low histamine diet and she ended up sending me a food sensitivity test from a while ago. And it did say she was sensitive to a lot of histamine foods. So if I were to have seen that before we started the low histamine diet or before I came up with that idea, yeah, it could have given me a clue that maybe we should try low histamine. But when you are going through something GI related, your body is going to be reacting to a lot of different foods. So you have to you don't have to, but work with someone to help you find the root cause of it. Because once you find the root cause of it, such as not enough stomach acid or pancreatic enzyme insufficiency, once you kind of address those issues, you notice that you can tolerate foods again. So I think if you're not tolerating a bunch of foods, you don't need a food sensitivity test to tell you that, but maybe you need like a stool test, or just sometimes I don't even need to do a stool test, just a Q&A with me or some other healthcare provider, because there's so many little things that could actually be going on, and could be actually quite simple to kind of address if we are motivated and open to do it.
Right. I mean, and like that's the other part, like the motivation to actually do this.
Mm-hmm. It's hard.
That's really hard
Yeah.
because I don't know, like it's one thing to be like, okay, maybe it will help me if I don't eat as many histamine foods. But
Yeah.
that's a
It's
lot of things to think about. And so I'm just gonna, whatever, just keep going through my
yeah.
life.
There's people that really are incredible and they're really good at disciplining themselves. But then, like for me, for instance, I'm not as good at that because with my history with an eating disorder and disordered eating, if I get disciplined, I'm really, really disciplined and it's not good for me. Like I won't do well. I'll take it to the extreme probably. I don't know. I haven't really gone down that path in a while, but when I actually was having more GI issues like 2 years ago, I did a stool test and I worked with a dietitian because I knew the information, but I just needed someone to And I was definitely learning like stool tests a little more. Like that's definitely stuff I didn't learn in school. So it helped to kind of work with someone that had a little more experience than me in that area at the time. But it was mostly for the accountability, like having someone tell me what to do and then checking in on me is what I need. I need, and
Mhm.
that's what a lot of people need. So yeah, it's definitely an investment, but I felt like it helped me so much when I just hired someone to work with me. So I wasn't just doing it on my own.
Mhm. I mean, yeah, and that's super important, especially for people who have a lot of mental health conditions. Like, I mean, specifically ADHD, obviously, like that is one that will benefit probably the most from an external source of motivation. But
Yeah.
even like depression, like it's really hard to get the motivation to do things for yourself when you're very
Hmm.
depressed. But if you have someone else like cheering you on, asking you, "Hey, did you do this?"
Hmm.
It's easier. It's so much easier because
For
it's,
sure.
yeah, just easier to do things for other people when you're feeling that way.
Yeah,
So,
I agree.
yeah. I think I have one more question about fiber that I'm curious about. So, say a person like got rid of fiber for some reason because they're like, I want to try to reset and then hopefully improve my tolerance to fiber. What are some types of fibers? Because like there's lots of different types of fibers. So maybe we should break that down first. But what are the types of fibers that we would want to start to implement first?
Yeah, so I have talked about soluble versus insoluble fiber, and while I think about it, I think it causes confusion in people and makes them worry like on the types of fiber. And I really don't want people to worry about the types of fiber. I just want people to get fiber. But you want to get diversity. So you want to get fiber. So fiber from whole grains, nuts, seeds, legumes, beans, fruits, vegetables. I think a lot of people think fiber is only in fruits and vegetables, but if anything, it's even more in whole grains and beans and legumes. Um, so the goal is to gradually increase, maybe let's say like 5 grams every week. It really depends on like where you're at. But gradually increase it by diverse, adding in more diversity. So different food groups. Um, and then you're naturally going to get all the different types of fibers. So there are so many different types of soluble and insoluble fibers. Um, Basically, soluble fiber is what helps bulk up your stools. So it can be helpful if you have diarrhea. It can also be helpful with constipation, but primarily, like if we're thinking, okay, we're having a lot of diarrhea, maybe we take psyllium husk. It's a soluble fiber, it can help bulk things up, for instance. Insoluble fiber is more like, I think of it just like a water hose, like it just flushes you out. So insoluble fiber is going to add more water, help things move. And then soluble fiber is going to kind of bulk up your stool and help form it. So the skin and the seeds and nuts are really high in soluble fiber. So like, or insoluble fiber. So chia seeds, really high in insoluble fiber. Um, Kiwi, the skin and the seeds in it makes it higher in insoluble fiber, but it also has soluble fiber. So I think if you're eating a piece of fruit, understand you're going to get both. But yeah, there are some foods. So sometimes if someone's having a lot of diarrhea, we might want to think about adding some more soluble fibers, but overall, just work on adding a fruit and vegetable to most of your meals, adding a whole grain. So that can be a piece of whole wheat toast, brown rice, or even white rice with a lot of veggies or beans to get fiber. It can be like Ezekiel bread or pastas. Um, yeah, just getting more diversity in your diet and trying new things is kind of what I want people to do. And that's why I actually did like a 30-day um, fuel with color challenge and I want to build on it. But it's essentially like I'm asking people to eat 3 different colored veggies and 2 different colored fruits every day just to get the diversity. But you could even build on that with trying a new grain. Maybe you try quinoa, maybe you try farro, maybe you make some soup with lentils. I think that's the most important thing. And then when you are increasing your fiber, to make sure you drink enough water, because a lot of people will get stomach aches and be like, oh, the fiber's the problem. Like it's not good. But you just need to give your body some water to help move the fiber through. Because once it's moved through, it helps. But some people don't get to that step and they get scared because of the way it makes them feel. But sometimes you just need to be more patient or start at a lower amount of fiber, make sure you are drinking enough water, and go from there.
Nice. And I really want to just emphasize the fact that the reason why we want to add fiber is because the fiber is the food for our gut microbiome. If we do not eat our fiber, our gut microbiome diversity is significantly impaired. And through so many studies, that more fiber, or sorry, the more gut diversity we have, the better we see mental health, the more health benefits in general. Like we see improvements in cardiovascular activity, we see improvements in, well, digestive function typically. But we also see decreases in all-cause mortality, like the more fiber we have and the more gut diversity we tend to have. And so like that's a super important reason to just eat our fiber and to not be doing a restrictive diet long term if we can help it.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. I think when we're thinking about like colon cancer being on the rise, we want to support our gut and give it the energy. The fermented foods we eat, and so there's fiber rich foods, there's fermented foods, there's foods with prebiotics, probiotics. Those foods are fueling our gut and helping build a space of good bacteria and protection so we don't get the bad bacteria in there. That can lead to health consequences. Um, so it doesn't need to be as overwhelming, I think, as people make it out to be. But if you are like struggling with increasing your fiber, or, not everyone's going to be able to tolerate kombucha if they have maybe like a histamine issue going on. So if you're really not tolerating foods, but you feel like you're eating really healthy, definitely like work with someone, because there's probably something else going on that you have to address first before you can increase your fiber. Um, Besides just taking everything out. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like that's exactly what I see in the literature all the time. Like the more
Yeah.
diversity of food, like the more diversity of plants specifically.
Yeah. And it's just how it goes with nutrition in general. Like I think people want an answer to a lot of things when it's not black and white. We don't have a lot of answers on seed oils. We don't have a lot of answers on a lot of the additives in foods, but that's why it's important to not consume the same thing every day. Get whole foods primarily, add rotation, rotate your foods out, get more diversity, and you should be in good shape because you're not over consuming anything either. But yeah.
Yeah, I feel like that's exact advice that I always see every time I like read. Because I mean, obviously I do a lot of research. I'm a nutrition scientist. I love researching.
Yeah.
That's what comes up. Just increase your diversity of diet. Don't eat the same thing all day if you can help it. I know, like if you have autism, tends to
It's hard.
decrease that ability. But
Yeah, I used to work with pediatrics, so yeah, it's hard. I feel bad for those parents, but there's a lot of things you can do. A lot of
yeah,
like occupational therapists can help a lot too.
we love OTs.
Yeah,
Oh, they're so helpful.
they're awesome. I've learned a
Mm.
lot from them.
So if someone was listening, struggling with all those gut health issues, liked hearing ya, can you just tell us more about how to find you, how to work with you, all the good
Yeah.
stuff?
Yeah, so I'm on Instagram and TikTok. If you go to the link in my bio on my Instagram or my TikTok, it'll take you to a page where you can apply to work with me, see some of the products I have. So I have that healthy eating challenge up there right now. It's free. You can just print off the colorful piece of paper, and hopefully it can inspire you to eat more fruits and vegetables. I have like an email flow, so you'll get some more resources each week. But yeah, that's the best way to reach me. You can also email me. My email is gabrielle@dietitiangabrielle.com. And yeah, definitely email me if you're on the fence about working with a dietitian, or you aren't able to commit to 3 months, I usually work with people for 3 months. But yeah, I definitely like to help people in any way I can. So try to find something that can work for you.
Yeah. And I just love how you just know a lot and you're very open-minded and you just love listening to people and their experiences to help them. So,
Thanks. I
yeah.
appreciate it.